Hello. Today we are going to talk about Microsoft Viva. So what exactly is Viva? Viva is a customer experience platform that helps bring people and teams together and brings the best out of them. So how does Viva do this? There are 4 components to Viva. The first one is connections. Connections bring together the culture and communication within the entire organization into a single portal. And this is a portal that is built on SharePoint home site. The second is insights. Insights give you a window into the employees' activities, thus helping them improve their productivity. The third is topics. Topics amalgamates knowledge from the corpus of data across your organization and thus brings this to the end user through the tools that they commonly use. And the last is learning. Learning helps improve the skill and knowledge of the users within the organization. Today we are going to look at Viva Topics specifically. So what does Topic do? What are the various components to Topics? Now there are 3 aspects to getting Topics up and running and then using them. First is topic identification. Topic identification is done by configuring topics in your environment, setting it up so that the topics engine or the AI engine can crawl through the corpus of data and then pick up what those knowledge topics are. The second aspect is the curation of these topics. So subject matter experts who really understand these topics can go and curate them. They can create their own topics, build the right relationship, and this will then help AI learn and understand what those topics mean. And the third is the discovery of topics. So once the topics have been defined, how do end users actually know about these topics and understand what is there and start consuming these topics? And this is brought through the popular tools like Teams, SharePoint, Outlook, where you would see the relevant topic cards and allow the users to explore more on what those topics mean. Today, we will look at how to configure topics in the environment so we can initiate the process of topic identification. So now we will look at how to set up topics in your tenant so it can start the topics identification and discovery process. To do that, you would go into Admin Center, Settings and Organizational Settings. And if you have the topics license enabled, you would see the topic experience appear here. I will go through the initial setup. So I've got some screenshots when I first set it up, because once you set that up, your experience is slightly different. You would get your typical Admin Center pop up here with all the properties that you can change. But when you first set it up, this is how it would look like. It'll talk about what Viva Topics is and give you some information on the user impact of enabling topics. So click on the Get Start button, and then it takes you through a wizard that will help you configure the required parameters for topics. First one is, where do you go and identify topics? What is in scope of topic discovery? Your standard out-of-the-box recommendation is to go for all sites, but depending upon your organization, you might either want to pick up only selected sites or maybe exclude certain sites which you know doesn't contain any relevant data. So rather than just picking up unnecessary topics, you can exclude those sites. Similarly, you can even exclude certain topics rather than just excluding particular sites. So if you're aware that there are certain words which might have no relevance within your organization, you can, but you do have content for those, you can put them into this exclusion list. Once you have set up the scope for discovery or for the AI to go and crawl, the next would be to determine who can actually see the output of these topics. You could set it to everyone within your organization, or you can change that to a select group of people. In this case, I've provided an AD security group where the initial set of users who would be trialing out topics, they are members of this group. Once the visibility is set, you can then specify the permissions to create and edit and to manage the topics. Now, there are new roles that have been released as part of the topics product, roles like the knowledge manager. So typically in your organization, you would allocate these roles to the users so they can actually go and do this. Now here you could select a particular security group in order to specify who can do the creation and modification and the management of topics, or you could just allow everyone. Now, typically the creation and management of topics would be managed by a select group of people rather than everybody within the organization. And the last is to create the topic center. Now, topic center is the SharePoint site that will be the main portal to see what topics have been discovered, suggested, and where you would then go and do the curation and management of topics. Once you have gone through the visit, it'll give you the final set of parameters that has been picked up from you, and once you click activate, it will go and enable topics, provision the site collection for a topic center, and once everything is done, you would get a message that Viva Topics is activated within your tab. Once you have managed to set up topics, you can go back to Admin Center and then have a look at topic. The first time you set this up, you would notice that the topic center doesn't show anything. It's just a blank topic center saying suggest a topic. It allows you to create a new topic, but there is nothing suggested for you. Similarly, when you go into the manage topics area, there are no topics. It says 0 suggested topics. This is perfectly normal because it takes few days before it can start to suggest some topics and really understand the content, because it needs to crawl through all the content within your sites, and depending upon the amount of data you have within your tenant, it could take some days. Now, typically from what we have seen, it takes roughly about 2 weeks before it can go through a lot of the content and suggest enough topics. But generally after 3 days, 2 to 3 days, you should start seeing a list of topics appearing here. Now, what are the topics? How does it identify? So initially, the standard topics that it identifies are subjects like projects, events, or names of organizations, or places and locations, or different type of products that you might be using either within your organization or externally, different type of work or fields of study. So these are almost like this named entity recognition that you would see in most AI models. Now, once it identifies the content, it then tries to identify the people associated with this topic, all the different files associated with this topic. So when you have enough of this information, it will then go and create or rather try to identify alternate names for those topics, a description about the topic which it could pick from the content, or in many cases it can even go externally onto sites like Wikipedia and pick that information. It will then try to look at Microsoft Graph and identify the people who are related to this particular topic, who have been generating documents or other content related to this topic. And it will then identify the relevant files, sites, and pages that has the relevance of this topic. So it's not just a standard word search. It looks at more of a relevance of the content in order to identify this topic. So once your topic experience is set up, the next time you go into Admin Center, you would see the same set of parameters that you had changed. So if you do need to restrict the content that is going to be in scope of topics, or need to manage what topics should be excluded, you can change them in these settings here. The list of sites that are currently either there's an inclusion or exclusion. Both of them would be available through this CSV. So you can open the CSV, which would look something like this, which has the name of the site and the URL of the site. This can be updated, and you can add this back into the topics configuration, and it will then start to either include or exclude those sites. There is more information about the CSV and how you need to configure that. So if you go to the Microsoft documentation on Plan for Topics, you would see the information. There's a format of the CSV and what those inclusion exclusion looks like. Similarly, if you want the topics to be excluded, they can be done using the CSV, which takes the three different columns in it: the name, expansion, which is the optional name or the acronym for it, and if the match type is going to be an exact or a partial match type. So if you do add these, then those particular words will be excluded in case topics identifies them. So in the topic center, you can see there aren't any topics here. That's because this particular user hasn't contributed to any of the content, and hence is not seeing any suggested topics. But if you do go into the Manage Topics area, which, by the way, does seem to, the Manage Topics, the menu item sometimes disappears. So if that does happen, you just have to refresh the tab and it should appear back. Yeah, there you go. It's appeared back now. Yeah, so here you would see a list of all the suggested topics. So the topics that AI has picked up after going through all of the content and has found enough valid usage of these terms in the right context, then they come up here. The quality suggests how many of this how many of the users within the organization have got access to this data. So a higher quality would typically indicate that this is available to a lot of people. A lower quality would indicate it's restricted to a much smaller set of people. So we will look at the whole curation process later, but at a high level, there are suggested topics, and once you confirm it, you have confirmed topics, and then you would publish it and remove it. But at this stage, we will focus on the topic discovery. So in a prod tenant, so I've got a different tenant here where there is a lot more data, and you can see it has suggested a lot many more topics, and within those topics it will ask you if you need to be listed on the topic, and you can say yes or no, remove me. If you do confirm yourself to be listed on the topic, then those topics will appear at the bottom in the confirmed connections area. So in future, if anyone looks at those topic cards, they might see your name associated with those topics. So what we have seen today is how to enable topics in your tenant, how to configure it so it can target the right set of site collections or exclude the unnecessary topics, and then understand what the whole discovery process looks like. So once it has discovered, it will give you all the suggested topics. So once you've seen the suggested topics, that's good. That means it is working, and it would typically take few days before you can start seeing any topics, and roughly about 2 weeks before you would see a lot of topics appear within the topic center. So in the next session, we'll see how you can now start curating these topics.